Hi, welcome to Collective Narratives Fall 2020 End of Quarter Update. My name is Nina. I will start today's presentation by giving an example of myself, which can hopefully help illustrate the problem. The pandemic, needless to say, have affected all aspects of our lives. And as a huge foodie myself, a question I've been wondering is how it changes our relationship with food, including food security, eating habits, etc., etc. And when I searched in Google, the results I got was stories from media outlets from around the world about the situation worldwide, which were helpful but weren't all that I wanted to know. I was also super curious about how people around me are experiencing among the Northwestern community, or even more specifically among the Northwestern International Students community that I'm part of. And through talking to community members, I found out that I was not the only one. We all hope to connect with the community with an experience that we mutually go through. We want to understand what's happening within the community. We want to contribute information that is helpful to others, and we also want to engage in discussion on issue with the community members with diverse views. And essentially, we can summarize it to that the community wants to tell and read a story of their own version. But with existing technologies, it's really hard to do so because, first of all, it's hard to gain a direct understanding with so many information floating online. And secondly, it was not super clear what contributions are needed. And even if we want to help, how can we actually help, and why are our contributions valuable to others? And certainly, many issues just went unspoken at all because there isn't a channel to discuss it with people who actually care. My contributions this quarter were 4 steps. So first one being need finding, and I used results from need finding to help me come up with new problem statement and design argument. And from there, I developed a lo-fi prototype, and I tested the prototype during a user study by the end of the quarter. First, the need finding study. I conducted the study because I wasn't sure who exactly were the stakeholders for CN. And at the time, I had a general contributor versus audience model in mind, but I struggled to describe what personas would fit into these roles. And for the sake of time, I won't go into too much detail, but my biggest takeaway was that there isn't a clear distinction for users between being a contributor and being an audience, which inspired me to create a new set of user class, which is the narrative organizer and the participants, who can be a contributor or an audience or both. I focused most of my springtime on the participants because I found them to be the most intriguing, and they also have higher priority because they are the ones who make the story. For the narrative organizer, it basically means that someone who needs to find a topic, write the template, and design the questions in the CN system. I have multiple hypotheses about what personas might fit, and they might even share the same persona as participants, but it would require further research to decide, and is not the focus of today. For the conciseness of slides, I divided my design arguments for participants into 3 parts, each corresponding to one desired outcome of the participants. And here's part 1. The desired outcome is that participants want to understand what's happening within the community regarding the topic. Currently, research is already difficult, and it's even harder to collect first-hand data right on spot, which are accurate and vivid and what we want to see. I was hoping that we can use a narrative organization structure to help make research easier, and use context identification to help us identify users who are in a relevant context. In part 2, the desired outcome is that participants want to support other community members through contributing helpful information. However, it's hard to identify what's actually helpful, and even if we want to contribute something, we're not sure it can be actually valuable, which was a huge bummer for active community members. I was hoping to use context-aware prompting to let users know that they are in a context where they could actually give valuable information, and use casting, which allows users to identify sub-angles within that context, further solidifies and helps them see their value contribution. In part 3, the participants want to engage in discussion on the issue with community members with different diverse opinions on the topic. As you can tell, diversity of perspectives in this case is very important. However, with existing technologies, some issues became invisible, and even with those that do get discussed, there is a trade-off between organization and diversity. I hope to use opportunistic prompting to help us make the invisibles more visible and use a narrative structure to find the sweet spot between organization and diversity. Okay, after all these long design arguments, you might wonder, what does CN actually look like? Here you can see an interface model that I built last quarter and tested this quarter, which hopefully can give a more visual explanation of some of the terms. On the screenshot on the left, you can see it's a prompting, context-aware prompting, which will prompt you if you're in a relevant context. In this case is when you're at a grocery store, which indicates you've finished grocery shopping. And the second screenshot is casting, which will allow a user to further identify the specific context they're in. Even if you're at a grocery store, you might have different specific contexts, you might have different purposes, you might buy different things, and those information will help us identify which category your contribution will fit in. And the third one is a template for contribution, and the fourth screenshot on the most right was the artifact and which features the narrative structure. What I found to be the riskiest in the prototype was the narrative structure. As you can probably remember, I was hoping to use it to overcome the obstacle and achieve two of the participants' desired outcomes. One, whether it helps them understand the community, and two, whether they foster diverse discussion. The use case I tested was how international students changed their way of eating during the quarantine. And I tested with 8 international students. The method was basically a 3-day prototype testing and follow-up interview for each of the study participants. And because it's a lo-fi prototype, I will go into a little more detail about how the lo-fi prototype is made. Lo-fi means that I manually mimic the system characteristics, which was supposed to prompt, cast, and create artifacts automatically. You can see how I acted like a bot on the first screenshot and how I mocked casting through a survey form in the second. And here are my hypotheses. Because I already modified my design arguments a little bit based on study results, the hypotheses you see here that I made before the study are going to differ somewhat with the design arguments I just presented. I had 3 ideal outcomes listed. First, participants believe that the artifact helps them understand the community without spending too much effort. Second, participants feel that the artifact captures contributions that they relate to. And third, after reading through the artifact, participants feel clear that their responses add value to the narrative. This was the final artifact that I got. I created this by manually filling out the artifact template I designed in the interface model I using actual user inputs from the study. And let's talk about study results. I didn't have space to put in the exact evidence here, but I summarized the quotes into insights. For ideal outcome 1, there are mainly 2 elements in this argument I want to test. First, comprehensiveness, and second, low effort. I think the insights basically tell us that the users felt that the narrative structure was relevant, exhaustive, which indicates comprehensiveness, and it was also allowed them to understand the situation quicker compared to social media, which to me means that they're not spending too much effort. So I think the study findings validate design argument part 1, that the narrative structure in the artifact helps the user to understand the topic in a low-effort way. And moving on to ideal outcome 2, it's an outcome that we see more problems, partially because I use relating, which is a vague word that might mean different things to different people, which cause mixed feedback. I will try to define the term more clearly in future research, but essentially the feedback was that users all feel that they can somewhat connect to some of the contributions, especially from people they know. And I think it means that CN may achieve the desired outcome more effectively if the user class is limited to a smaller community. And the second bullet point was that they hope that the contributions could reflect the identity of the community. I think that potentially suggests a new high-level goal, which will lead to a new design argument for us, but of course it will require further study. And thirdly, with the current artifact, participants connect more with experiences rather than opinions because essentially they like more diverse content. I think that means that my design argument part 3 failed because it doesn't encourage diversity in opinions. And it's definitely something I need to work on. And towards ideal outcomes 3, which is about how participants feel that they have added value to the narrative. The artifact helps users to identify the value they add to the narrative more clearly because of the visible casting and categorization process. And the values that the users have identified in the study include diversity, practical information, emotional support, etc. I think that finding validates design argument part 2, which means that the participants can realize the value of their contributions through the artifact. And here are some other insights that I identified which I could not fit into any of the 3 ideal outcomes. That many readers felt that the contribution studies, and it also raised a new research question. My interpretation for this is that I need to improve the use case and prompting questions for this in the future studies to enable deeper contributions. And it also raised a new research question for me, which was, what does in-depth mean to community members? Is it possible to enhance connection to the community without deeper personal disclosure? And that's it for my study. Reflecting on the study, I think it would achieve better and clearer results if I were able to slice it to smaller pieces and test them one at a time. Sienna is a project with a lot of moving parts, and in order to test the artifact, I had to mock the whole process before getting an artifact to test with. The variables during the process, especially because it's a lo-fi prototype, further complicate the interpretation of the results. In future studies, I'm considering either focusing on an earlier step first or recycling the user inputs I got from this study to avoid going through the process again and enable better slicing. The next steps for my project would be to do follow-up study on the new risk I identified and test other parts of the design argument. Thank you.